Good evening, and thank you so much for tuning into this very first podcast. And the nature of podcasts actually means that I should be also saying good morning or good afternoon, but the message is the same. Welcome. So glad that you're tuning in. The guest for this first episode is Randy Weston, who is a person who I've always loved his music, and when I got to meet the guy, can't help but love him as a person as well. He has come up through the 50s and had associations with Thelonious Monk, Langston Hughes, Fela Kuti, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis. He was around with all the greats, got to play with folks like Charlie Parker, and is still alive today and on top of his game. His music is sounding great. So I interviewed him for about 2 hours at his home in Brooklyn, and then we broadcasted on the radio as like a 5-hour show or something like that. It was a really long show. And so for this podcast, I'm just going to put in parts of the interview. We'll just do part 1, part 2 down the line, because if you hear a little bit from him, you'll want to hear more. So here is some music from Randy Weston, jazz pianist, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks again. In your words, because that first album, you do hear a lot of Monk, the Cole Porter album. What, in your words, what did you pick up from him?
Whoa, what did I pick up from Monk? Well, I have to go back before that. See, Coleman Hawkins, that was my idol, Coleman Hawkins. When he did Body and Soul, it's one of the greatest masterpieces of music up until today I've ever heard.
Right.
So I heard Monk play with Coleman Hawkins. That's how I discovered Monk. So with Monk, I heard space, I heard imagination, but I also heard magic in his piano. In other words, no sounds that are not there. So I was attracted to that, you know. So that's how I got together. And I went to Monk's house, spent about 3 years with him, just hanging out, watching him, going to rehearsals, listening, you know. So he made a big impact upon me.
And so he would be discussing things other than music, I imagine.
No, didn't discuss.
He didn't talk about
just
music.
Hung out.
Just hung out.
Yeah. See, in them days, you didn't talk too much, you know. You just watch and listen.
So that makes me think of another time that I'm so curious about, which is a time at Max Roach, where it seems like every hipster in town was in there. Can you describe the people who were there and what the scene was kind of like?
Well, you see, Brooklyn has always been very community-minded, Brooklyn. Plus, the advantage of New York City, all the great artists have to come here. You can be great in Detroit, you can be great in Chicago, you can be great in Los Angeles, but you all have to come here to prove yourself. But those of us who lived in Brooklyn or born in Brooklyn, they'd all come. So Max Roach was so far ahead. He was playing with Charlie Parker at that time. His rhythm section was Duke Jordan, Brooklyn, Tommy Potter, Brooklyn. So at Max's house, I met Charlie Parker, I met Dizzy, I met Miles Davis, I met George Russell, because his apartment was about 2 blocks from the restaurant that I ran, you see, because my father, he had other restaurants. So I took this place over 3 years. And the restaurant, we had the hippest jukebox you could imagine. All the modern music, Sarah Vaughan, Tad Dameron, Dizzy, Duke, but we also had Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Marius Milhaud. So people would come, we were open 24 hours a day. So all the musicians would come 3 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, midnight, you know. And I had a gallery in the back of the restaurant, never dreaming I was going to be a professional musician. And that's before I went to the Berkshires, you see.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So it was seeping in.
It was destiny.
Wow.
Yeah. And also, one of the things that I point out, this was our traditional music. A lot of people don't realize it. They talk about jazz music, but this music was our survival. We had the black church on Sunday, we had the big bands, we had the blues group, but it was all our way of life, you see. From Max Roach to a Huey Blake, you know. So I was lucky to be involved in all these people. And I would do what a lot of young people would do. You would just go in their house and sit in the corner and watch and listen. You'd ask a few questions, but not too many. You just watch and listen.
So at this restaurant, these guys would come by, Charlie Parker or whoever,
right?
And they would put on. It'd be late at night. They put on Shostakovich or something like that.
There was a jukebox,
Right.
But I got the best records on this jukebox.
Yeah.
So from blues, you name it, everything was on this box, you know.
And the few clips that I've heard of Charlie Parker talking, it seems like he's got an intelligence that's almost intimidating. Is that how you describe it?
Well, you see, all of those gentlemen, they were down to earth. No ego trip with these guys. I mean, they were brilliant, but they never pretended that they were brilliant. Yeah, they just acted like you and I. Charlie Parker, one of the most spiritual people I ever met. Max Roach made me play for Charlie Parker in his house. And I was scared to death. I said, I got to play for Charlie Parker. What? You know? No, they were beautiful people. Because, you know, going back to African traditional music, because we come out of Africa. We brought that spirituality from the continent of Africa. That meant that there was no separation between the people and the music, you see. So you would hang out with those guys even if you didn't play a note. You know, it was just a love for the music and a great respect for the musicians. The musicians played a very high role in the community. Because of segregation, we couldn't get out of the black community. So that was our way of survival. And all this music was a way for us to keep our spirits up. And that's why they were so fantastic. Whether it was a Jimmy Rushmore, a Count Basie, whether it was a Mac Driller, whether it was a Dizzy, but that's what the music was all about, you see. So we had a lot of love, a lot of respect. As I said, the community, we were very close.
Can you elaborate on what you mean that Charlie Parker was one of the most spiritual people that you ever met?
You can't describe spirit in words. He just was. One good example of Charlie Parker, after I met Max, I knew Max, but after I met Charlie Parker and played for him, I didn't think he knew who I was. And Max made me play some of my songs, because I had written a couple of songs, but I had no idea I was going to be a professional musician. But Max heard something, you know. And so I went, myself and a drummer named Maurice Brown, we went to the Royal Roost, which was on Broadway, the jazz club. We went down here, Charlie Rouse and Tad Dameron and Fats Navarro. And Charlie Parker was at the bar, and he saw me coming down. And he called me. I didn't think he knew who I was. He called me like that. And told myself and a young drummer who studied with Max Roach, whose name was Maurice Brown. And he said, come with us, come with me. And he took us upstairs, put us in a taxi, took us to 52nd Street, took us to a nightclub. I forgot which one, the Three Deuces, I'm not sure which club. And there was a band playing, a small group playing in the club. We walked in. In the middle of the tune, told the piano player to get up, and told the drummer to get up. Now, you don't do that to a musician. You don't do that. But with Charlie Parker, everybody, the piano player got up, the drummer got up. He told me to sit the piano. He told my friend the drummer sit the drum. Took out his horn, played with us for 45 minutes, and walked out and left. Didn't say a word. That was Charlie Parker. See, those guys didn't talk much. They were so brilliant, but they didn't say anything. We just watched them. Like Monk, Charlie Parker, Dizzy, all these people. Giants.
All right, so thus ends the first podcast in this series. I hope there'll be many more. Let me know if you enjoyed it, because that'll rally the spirits of the troops to produce more of these shows. There's a lot in the archives, so I just have to sit down and put them in podcast form. But it'd be nice to hear from you. I'm easy to get in touch with. Whatever website you're hearing this from will probably have my contact info, which can be found at www.davidellenbogen.com. Many thanks to Randy Weston for giving his permission for us to use this interview, and for being such a gracious host at his house. And he also let us use the music underneath. We played his song African Cookbook from the Zep Tepe album, which is his latest album. And speaking of music, we have to thank multi-instrumentalist Joshua Geisler, who, along with me, composed and recorded the reggae dub theme you hear now and at the beginning of the show. And our last thanks goes out to you, listener. Thank you so much for sitting through this show and hopefully enjoying it. And we hope to see you again. So, as they say, take care of the music, and the music will take care of you. So take care.